Lems is really one of the very first brands, at least in this modern era, to change the way that people look at shoes by really focusing on foot health with the really wide toe boxes, reducing the heel so the shoe's pretty level all the way across. But unlike most barefoot style brands, Lems stands apart because they're built to be as comfortable as they are healthy for your feet by giving you a nice, soft, squishy foam platform to stand on. And I found out about Lems before I even started this channel and I've been a big fan ever since. That's why there's literally 20 of these boots and shoes cut apart over the last few years. And it's because they're simply one of the best brands that actually do it. But at the same time, they're not without their faults, and there's important things to consider when switching to a brand like this. So for Showdown September, I thought we'd try a new style video where we do a showdown of a specific shoes brands, at least the majority of their shoes, to really give you a full picture of what the brand is, to understand the variables of what you might want to consider for outsoles, uppers, midsoles, which Lems is right for you, why Lems might not be right for you. So we're gonna cut all of them in half, run through our test so that you can finally have the ultimate guide to Lems footwear. So then who is Lems? Well, this comes from their website. Well, in 2008, Lems creator Andrew reached his endpoint searching for shoes that had a natural shape of the foot. So he started dissecting his favorite running shoes, and Andrew began to realize that the big shoe brands had it all wrong. A shoe should be built around the natural shape of the human foot and not the other way around. After 3 years of research, countless hours of design, and dozens of prototypes, Andrew's unwavering focus finally paid off. In September 2011, Lems released its first product, the Primal. So then what shoes are we actually looking at? Well, we're gonna try to look at their entire range of shoes, but we're gonna focus mostly on the ones that we have here. And I think it's easiest to understand their whole range of shoes by breaking them into certain categories. And the main categories to me is their sandals, which is just one with the switchback. There are more casual sneakers like their 9 to 5, their Chillums, their Drifters, it's a good name, Quartz, Chukka, Malibu, and Mariner. And then their athletic shoes, the Trailblazer, the Primal Zen, and all the other Primal Ecos 3, the Lights, the Trailheads. And the last category would be boots with their Boulder boot range, their Chelsea boot range, and the more modern hiking boots with the Outlander and Breck. So then what are the three things that really make Lems stand out from all the other brands like Nike, Adidas, and even some of the barefoot brands? Well, one is that they're low or zero drop, meaning that heel's really low. They're barefoot style, but very, very comfortable. So they have a lot of the barefoot attributes, but still with a lot of squish underneath your foot, and that super wide toe box. So now that you understand the bigger picture of the brand, what are the variables you need to consider when deciding between all these different shoes? Well, one, starting with the upper, Lems has a fairly eco-friendly consumer base. So they have 3 different main types of materials. They've got leather, they got vegan leather, and just your typical textiles. And I always lean towards leather because I think it's stronger, it's more durable, it smells less, it's better looking, and I personally think it's more eco-friendly on the whole. But not everyone wants to wear dead animals around their feet, and vegan leather can perform a lot better in wet conditions. It can sometimes be more abrasion resistant in certain applications, and ultimately it's just a lot more affordable. And the nice thing about Lems, regardless of what I think of people not wanting leather, they have a wide variety and a lot of versions that are vegan friendly, that don't have leather. But as far as I'm concerned, if you don't care about that, just get the leather pairs, because they're always 99% of the time going to outperform fake leather. But keep in mind, I have a leatherworking business, so heavily biased towards leather. But at the same time, I think there's plenty of evidence to back up the fact that if you don't care about the fact that leather is from an animal, leather's gonna be a superior choice. Next thing to look at when considering buying a pair of Lems is the linings, because you've got a few different materials, from classic fabric, textile linings, fake leather in the lining, but really no real leather anywhere in any of these shoes. You know, there's a few spots where it looks like there is, like with this shoe, that's fake leather. You know, there's a couple spots on some of these Chelseas that have just like a little bit of leather, but really not enough to really make me excited that, or even think that it's leather lined. And for the same reasons, I like leather as a lining material, but it's not as vital to me because there's a lot of downsides to having a leather lining. Like, it's less breathable, it's a lot hotter, it's more expensive to use as a lining material. And for this price range of all their shoes, it's pretty rare to see a full leather lining all the way through. And for the fabric linings, you've got a couple different versions. You know, you've got kind of like a jersey style material. You've got more of your cotton twill or canvas style linings on their more basic shoes. On their more performance based and hiking shoes, you've got this moisture wicking chevron material that's really popular in a lot of shoes across the board. It's more moisture wicking, allegedly. It doesn't smell as bad, allegedly. Then there's that fake leather I talked about. But for the most part, they're all fabric or textile linings, and they're gonna perform roughly the same. But I still think it's worth considering. Sometimes when you see what looks like leather on the inside of these shoes, it's fake leather. But honestly, for the most part, the linings in the Lems is not gonna be a huge deciding factor for most people on most of these shoes. Maybe one day someone will convince Lems to make a version of their Boulder boot with a little bit of a leather lining instead of this kind of lining. You never know. Maybe someone that specializes in leather, the YouTube channel. But one thing that really does matter, and honestly, I've probably worn Lems more than any other brand over the last 5 years, and that's because of the shape of the toe box. They've got 3 main last shapes: a medium last, which is like their trailhead, which I don't have an example of, their wide natural shape, like their drifter shoes, and then their widest natural shape, which is in their boulder boots. This is less unique today, but 10 years ago it was really unique, and that's why I found Lems, as I was looking for something that had a pretty wide toe box, it still looked good, it's still a boot that I could work in, that I could go do some stuff in, and Lems was like the only ones that were doing it at the time. And there's brands like Keen, there's brands that have some somewhat wide toe boxes, but we're talking like actually wide anatomical toe boxes. But that super wide toe box isn't for everyone, and that's why they've released their medium last, their wide natural last, just to kind of round it out, because not everybody wants all the toe room, and occasionally, especially for athletics and hiking, people like to have their feet a little bit more secure and not have as much room for the toes to be slopping around on the inside. And so I like that they added those to the lineup. Some of the barefoot hardcore nerds are very upset with that kind of stuff. But for me, and probably the vast majority of people that aren't super in the barefoot world, they want a lot of the attributes, but without the duck feet look. And that's why I really like the boulder boots, because that little mock toe stitch really hides how wide it actually is. But one thing that the vast majority of these more barefoot wide toe box brands still do not do to this day, and it makes no sense to me, because I want comfort when I'm wearing shoes. I'm wearing shoes to protect my feet and have some comfort. Have almost nothing underneath your foot. It's just like a little bit of rubber, a little bit of lasting material. And like that's part of the idea, right? Like you want natural articulation, you want to build up the strength of your feet, you want to do all these things, but not on an everyday basis. I'm just trying to be comfortable and relax and go to work and get my day done. I'm not trying to exercise my feet every day and make my feet sore. And the fact that Lems on almost every single one, if not every single one of their shoes, has a nice big slab of foam as the midsole, that makes all the difference in how these barefoot shoes wear. Because if you look at any of the other barefoot shoes that we've cut apart, they almost never even have a midsole, let alone having a soft, squishy foam midsole. And most of those barefoot shoes are so minimal and all at the same time so expensive that a lot of people end up injuring themselves because they don't know how to transition from regular shoes to these really barefoot shoes. If you don't know what I'm talking about with the midsole, a midsole is exactly what it sounds like. It's in the middle between the outsole, it's on the ground, and the insole that you're standing on. Right in the middle is the midsole. So what kind of midsoles do all these Lems have? Well, instead of going through every single number, here's just a list of the durometers and the thicknesses. But for the most part, the thicker the foam, the more squish you're gonna get. The higher the number in the durometer, the more firm and the stiffer the foam is, the lower, the softer it is. So it's always a combination of how thick it is and how stiff it is. But for the most part, all these are around the same squish. They're roughly gonna feel about the same. A few of these like hiking boots will feel a little bit different, but for the most part, they're all soft and squishy. And then like I mentioned, a lot of people really, especially in the barefoot world, care about drop. If it's off by like, oh, it's got a 2mm drop, I ain't wearing it, I can feel the difference. I'm like, okay. You probably can't, because your heel's gonna settle down into the heel enough that it's probably gonna equal out anyway. So to me, the whole drop thing's a little bit over exaggerated, but I do like having a near zero drop shoe, because I hate, especially with some Nikes and these really tall like Air Unit, like bubble shoes, like the Air Maxes, any of those high heel ones, I hate wearing those every day, not just because my toes are squished, but because I feel like I'm on my toes, like walking around tippy toe all day. And I don't mind that as much in boots, because it has some practicality to it. There's some reasons behind it, and it has a certain look. But for casual sneakers, for everyday wear, for recovering from whatever, I like the zero drop. I like the wide toe box, and I don't think it matters that much if the difference between true zero drop and 2 to 3 millimeters, but some people care about it. So to give you the information of which ones have zero drop and which are not, here's the zero drops and here's the non-zero drops and their millimeter differences between heel to toe. And I really don't think it's an important enough thing to consider the difference in millimeter drop. If you like one, just go with it. I guarantee most people are not gonna catch that. But it is very different wearing a barefoot shoe where you don't have as much drop, because you can end up stretching your calves out a little bit. So ease into them just to be safe. And it is an important thing to consider if you've never worn a zero drop shoe. And then to one of the most important things that really changes how these boots and shoes perform out in the real world is the outsole. Because you've got basically 3 different forms of outsole. You've got your foam blown rubber outsole like this. You've got your grip outsole that has all these little herringbone cuts in it, and then you got your full rubber outsole. The blown rubber outsole, like all these shoes have here listed out, it's the softest of all the outsoles. It's the lightest, it's the most flexible, and that's because it's not really an outsole, it's technically just the midsole. You're just standing on the midsole that, like some of these other boots and shoes, have an outsole attached. Obviously it's a little bit softer foam, but you get the idea. You're basically standing on the midsole, and that's why it's so soft, squishy, and that's why, for me, I really like this outsole for like shop use, for just walking around on hard concrete, because it's very, very squishy. But it's not very grippy. So if you take this up on hikes, if you're trying to really get a lot of grip out of this, it's just a soft foam that you're standing on, and once you start wearing it down, it really flattens out. It's definitely the least grippy out of all the outsoles. Then to the most grippy is probably your grip outsole, which is, these are basically designed to emulate how geckos grip onto things. We've got all these little reliefs that create little fingers that grip onto anything. This whole outsole is designed for more water use, where every time you take a step, you're getting more surface area contact with whatever rock or whatever you're standing on, so that you get more grip rather than having one single hard point that will easily slip off. And it does work. And they're more durable than the blown rubber outsoles, but not quite as durable as the full rubber outsoles. Because if you look at the two of these, you can see the pretty big difference in the height of the lugs, the amount of material that's removed from the grips compared to the full rubber. And this rubber outsole is gonna give you the most grip, it's gonna be the most durable, but at the same time, it's gonna be the least flexible and the least naturally articulated. But overall, if you don't care about outsoles, this is a good one to just default to, because you get all the squish of the midsole, plus all the grip and durability of a harder rubber outsole. And here's your measurements of how thick the outsoles are and how hard the outsoles are. Obviously, the higher the number, the harder they are, the least grippy but more durable. The lower the number, the more flexible, the softer, but less durable. So now let's cut these in half and I'll tell you what I'd recommend for each category, which you should maybe consider for which application, which to avoid, and ultimately finally see what's inside almost every single pair of limbs. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 pairs of limbs. So let's cut them in half. Okay, we got them cut in half. So let's give you some quick B-roll, starting with the sandal. Okay, now we've got them all cut in half. We've seen what's on the inside. How do you decide between each one, starting with the sandals? Well, there's only one sandal, and this sandal's pretty unique. You know, it's an adventure sandal. We did a comparison between some Bedrocks and I think some Lunas and some other brands, and they stand out in the industry just because of how soft and squishy and comfortable they are compared to so many other adventure sandals. But right now, Limbs only has this one option. And if you want to see that comparison, I'll put links in the description. But what about the casuals? Well, for me, honestly, it just mostly depends on which style you like the look of more. Like, they're so similar materials, you know, there's some difference between leather and not, but it almost matters more what look you're going for when it comes to casual compared to the materials they use, because now we've seen so many of the outsoles are the same, so many of the shapes are the same, the insoles are very similar, and so I would just go off of what you like the look of. For me, I really like the look of the Malibus and the Drifters, not just because of the name. I think they're just more casual looking, more discreet. I like how simple they are. I like the little mock toe stitch, but I also like these boat shoes. If I was into these boat shoe styles, this is a really good alternative to Sperry's that are pretty narrow. And then depending on your job, you know, you've got some different shoes that will work better in certain situations, like if you're a cook, or if you're standing all day and you want lots of squish, maybe you go with the foam outsole. If you need a lot of grip, you get one with the grip outsole. You know, there's all those variables really roll into that if it's more of a professional setting, but for casual use, I would just go with whichever one you like the look of. But what about the athletic style shoes with the Trailblazers, the Primals, and the Trailheads? Well, the Primals are definitely the lightest and most flexible of the bunch. I think that's the whole intention, is be really breathable, really flexible, very little restriction on when you wear these. And they've even increased the outsole and made it a little bit more substantial the last few years because of how minimal this shoe actually is. And these would be good for casual, they're good for like light running, light athletics, but because most of these don't have a harder outsole, they're not gonna be the best trail shoes or hiking shoes. The Trailheads are a hiking shoe that has more of a normal shaped toe box. So if you'd like the look of a more normal shoe, this is closer to it, but it's far from the look of a really pointy shoe, keep that in mind. But it still gives you the natural articulation. I wore these in New York for like a week, I loved them. You've got that more hard style outsole compared to that blown rubber, so this is where you're gonna see that step up in grip and durability that you can actually take these on a trail. And all while still being fairly breathable because of all the mesh, and you've got some leather panels. You also have some fake leather, but at least got some real leather on there. Then the Trailblazer is basically just the Trailhead, but it's a little bit wider, it's a more rugged trail shoe, and it has that more anatomical shape. And as for deciding between them, if you need something super light and you don't need a lot of grip, you could go with one of the Primals. And then between the two more trail shoes, I would just go off of what width you like and what aesthetic you like, because they basically are the same shoe, just slightly different. And then finally, to some of my favorite shoes with the boots that Limbs offers, because that was my very first shoe that I got from Limbs, was their canvas and leather Boulder boot. They don't even offer that anymore. I wish they'd bring it back. If I was deciding between all these various boots, whether it's the Chelseas or the Boulder boots, the first thing I'd look at is the outsole. You know, what do you actually need from this boot? Do you need all the grip? You need that durability? Do you need that more firm platform? Or are you looking just to have lots of squish, something that packs down really easy, you can travel with it? The outsole determines a lot of the uses of all these shoes across the board, but especially for the boots. Then the next thing I would consider is the waterproofing. Do you need it, or is it just gonna make your boots hotter? Are you actually gonna be using these outside where you want that waterproof protection? And combined with the outsole will really shape what use case you're gonna be using these shoes for and will help you decide. Because if you want a really rugged outsole, it's gonna be durable and a waterproof lining, I'd go with something like this. Then you got the opposite end of the spectrum for the Chelseas, where this is just a thinner suede leather. It's got the blown rubber outsole, really soft, really easy to use, while still being basically the exact same boot. And then for the Boulder boots, basically the same story. I'd start with the sole, then look at the waterproofing needs, and then the upper material and the upper color. But the Boulder boots don't look quite as similar as all the Chelsea boots, so you could lean more towards what aesthetic you're looking for, but I would still heavily consider the outsole and the waterproofing before you purchase it, because you might end up with this style of boot. You're like, oh, it's a full leather boot, I'm gonna hike in this, I'm gonna take it anywhere, and you didn't pay attention to this, the blown rubber sole. This is not gonna be the best sole for hiking. You're gonna regret hiking in this compared to literally any other outsole. And then looking at the more modern style boots, the main difference is just the height. You know, they're fairly similar across the board. And if you don't like the look of the Chelsea and you want something that ties a little bit tighter, but you don't like the look of the mock toe, these more modern boots are a really nice option. So if I had to choose my top 3 limbs to wear for the rest of my life, everything I want to do in my life, I have to do in a pair of limbs, which would I get? Well, I'd probably get the Trailblazer for anything from light hikes to going to concerts, standing, walking around. It's just a good all-around shoe. It's definitely more outdoors aesthetic. It's got the kind of colorful palette. It's pretty far away from like sneakerhead stuff, but I kind of like the look of it, and it's going to be a very, very versatile shoe. It might be the most versatile shoe of the entire lineup. Then I would probably go with the Drifters for just loafing around, you know, something that I can slip on, slip off super easy. If I beat my feet up trying to break in a pair of boots, slip those on. They're lightweight, they're breathable. You know, it's a more simplified version of this, softer, squishier outsole. And I also like this shoe as well. It's basically the exact same concept, but I'd like that mock toe stitch a little bit more. And then the final pick was tough because I really like the Chelseas, I really like the Boulder boots, and I would lean towards the Boulderproof waterproof for more hiking where it's a tougher outsole, it's got the better leather, and it's waterproof. But at the same time, I really like the Chelsea waterproof for working in the shop because I like the squish of the outsole, and I don't need really grip in the shop. But if I were to take this on a hike, it'd be pretty tough. And honestly, I could go either way with the waterproofing, but the pair that isn't waterproof just has a suede leather. So considering all that, I think it would still go with the Boulder boot when it comes to the boots. It's my favorite limbs. I've had a pair for like over 10 years. It looks good. That mock toe stitch hides everything. High quality leathers. You got a lot of options from the outsoles, the waterproofing. And to me, the Boulder boot is really the boot that built the brand. You know, the Prime was their first shoe, and maybe some other shoes are more popular, more successful. But the Boulder boot is my personal favorite limbs. So I gotta go with the Boulder boot. So now that we've seen every single component on 15 pairs of limbs, almost every single one, what's the big takeaway? Well, now we know why limbs is so popular. It's that wide toe box, it's that lower drop while still maintaining all that squish and taking what worked with the Boulder boots and the primals, and instead of trying to reinvent the wheel all the way from scratch, they take those same outsoles and midsoles and apply them to different styles of footwear so that you know exactly what you're getting and how it's gonna feel underfoot, even though the uppers are different. And with that wide toe box, with that near zero drop or zero drop, and having some squish, they're some of the most comfortable shoes in the entire world. And even though not every single pair is leather, there's still plenty of leather options, and they're continuing to improve things or release new products. And that is why I think Limbs is so popular. They just do it better than any other barefoot brand. They do it in a more practical, real world way instead of going straight to the bottom of having nothing underneath your foot. They're comfortable, they're reliable, and they have a lot of different options, and it's healthy for your feet. And so that's why I love Limbs. Honestly, probably more Limbs in the last 5 to 10 years than any other footwear brand. It's because I just can't help but get back in them. They're comfy and they're affordable. So now you should know everything you need to know to the ultimate guide to Limbs. So if you want a pair of Limbs, check them out below. They're a really cool small company, really trying to push the limits of the industry. Who knows, maybe one day we'll have a Boulder boot that has a leather lining. So let me know what you thought. Let me know what your favorite Limbs is, what you would choose if you had to choose 3 for your final 3 pairs of shoes for the rest of your life to do anything in. And let me know what other footwear you think does it better than Limbs for this style of footwear. And thank you guys for all your support. These videos are really long, they're really expensive to do, and they take a lot of time for the editors. So help this video out, give us a like, give us a subscribe, check out our handmade leather goods we make right here in the shop, check out our collaborations, because that's how all this is possible, because YouTube ain't paying. So thank you guys. See you.